The Passover meal has 4 cups. Every Jewish family for 3,500 years has known this. 4 cups, 4 promises, 4 acts of God's redemption. But on the night Jesus sat down with his disciples for the Last Supper, something extraordinary happened. He drank 3 cups, and then he stopped. He looked at his disciples and said, according to Luke, chapter 22, verse 18, I tell you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. He refused the last cup. He stood up, sang a hymn, and walked out into the darkness toward Gethsemane, and the Passover meal sat there on that table, unfinished. Most people believe the Last Supper was a complete meal, but it wasn't. Jesus deliberately left it incomplete, and what he did next changes everything you think you know about the cross, the Eucharist, and every Mass you have ever attended. To understand why Jesus refused that cup, you need to understand what the 4 cups actually mean. The Jewish Passover Seder, from the Hebrew word Seder, meaning order, follows a precise liturgical structure rooted in Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, where God makes 4 promises to Israel. I will bring you out. That is the first cup, the cup of sanctification. I will rescue you. That is the second cup, the cup of deliverance. I will redeem you. That is the third cup, the cup of redemption. And I will take you as my people. That is the fourth cup, the cup of consummation. Each cup is not optional. The Mishna, the earliest collection of Jewish oral law, states in Pesachim chapter 10 verse 1 that even the poorest person in Israel must not eat on Passover night without drinking all 4 cups. The rabbis took this so seriously that the community was required to provide wine for anyone who could not afford it. Now here is the critical detail. When Luke describes the Last Supper, he records Jesus taking a cup after supper. First-century Jews would have immediately recognized this as the third cup, the cup of redemption, which is drunk after the meal and the grace. This is the cup over which Jesus said, according to Luke chapter 22, verse 20, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." He instituted the Eucharist with the third cup. Then he vowed not to drink again and departed. The fourth cup was never drunk at that table. If you're interested in deepening your faith, hit like and tell me where you're watching from. Consider subscribing to stay rooted in Catholic truth. Support our videos, team, and tools. Link in description or scan the QR code on screen. But where does this teaching actually come from? The early church fathers understood the connection between the Passover and the Eucharist instinctively because many of them came from Jewish backgrounds. Saint Melito of Sardis, writing around 170 AD, declared in his homily on the Passover, "He is the Passover of our salvation." St. John Chrysostom, preaching around 390 AD in his homilies on Matthew, stated that the blood of the Eucharist was always prefigured in the altars and sacrifices of the law. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1339, teaches that Jesus chose the time of Passover to fulfill what he had announced at Capernaum, giving his disciples his body and his blood. None of this is a modern invention. The connection between Passover and Eucharist is ancient, apostolic, and unbroken. But what makes the fourth cup argument so powerful is where Jesus finally drinks it. Matthew chapter 26 verse 30 records that after the third cup, Jesus and his disciples sang a hymn and went out. That hymn was almost certainly the Hallel, Psalms 113 through 118. Which is traditionally sung between the third and fourth cups of the Seder. They left before the fourth cup. They walked into Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." That cup, not suffering in the abstract, the fourth cup, the cup of consummation, the cup that would complete the Passover sacrifice and seal the new covenant. So what does this mean practically for you today? It means the Last Supper and the cross are not 2 separate events. They are one continuous sacrifice. Jesus left the table with the Passover liturgically incomplete, carried it through Gethsemane, through the trial, through the scourging, and up the hill of Calvary, and he completed it there. John chapter 19 verse 28 records that on the cross, Jesus said, "I thirst." Then, in verse 29, he received sour wine on a hyssop branch. Stop right there, hyssop. The Hebrew word is azov. In the entire Bible, hyssop appears in only 2 sacrificial contexts. The first is Exodus chapter 12, verse 22, where Moses commands the Israelites to dip a bundle of hyssop in the Passover lamb's blood and apply it to the doorposts. The second is right here at the cross, where the sour wine is lifted to Jesus on a hyssop branch. John is telling you something. This is the true Passover lamb. And after receiving the wine, Jesus speaks the most important word in the New Testament. John chapter 19 verse 30. It is finished. In Greek, Tetelestai. It means it has been brought to completion. It has reached its goal. The Passover that began in the upper room is now complete. The fourth cup has been drunk. The sacrifice is consummated. This is why the Catholic Church teaches in Catechism paragraph 1366 that the sacrifice of Christ and the sacrifice of the Eucharist are one single sacrifice. Every Mass you attend is not a new sacrifice. It is the same sacrifice, the one that stretched from the upper room to the cross, made present across time. The rabbis themselves taught this principle. Mishna Pesachim, chapter 10 verse 5 says, "In every generation, a person is obligated to regard himself as if he personally left Egypt. Not remember that it happened. Regard yourself as if you were there." Jews call this Zikaron, a memorial that makes the past event present. That is exactly what the Mass does. You are not watching a reenactment of Calvary. You are standing at the foot of the cross. This is what you should think about the next time you see the priest lift that chalice. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Some Protestants argue that Hebrews chapter 9 verse 28 says Christ offered himself once for all, and therefore the Mass cannot represent his sacrifice without adding to it. This is an important objection that deserves a serious answer. The Mass does not add to the cross. It does not repeat it. The Catechism, paragraph 1367, is explicit. The sacrifice of the cross is perpetuated, not multiplied. The Jewish concept of Zikaron solves this perfectly. When Jews celebrate the Passover Seder every year, they do not believe they are redoing the Exodus. They are making the one Exodus present. Catholics do the same with the one sacrifice of Christ. Once for all means it never needs to be repeated. It also means it is so powerful that it can be made present in every age. Some may also ask whether we are reading too much into the Passover structure. After all, the Gospels never explicitly say Jesus refused the fourth cup, but the Gospels were written for an audience that already knew the Seder. When Luke says, after supper, first-century Jewish readers knew exactly which cup that was. When Matthew records a hymn being sung, they knew it was the Hallel, sung between cups 3 and 4. The departure after the hymn, but before the final cup, would have been shocking, obvious, and deliberate to anyone who had ever celebrated Passover. We should also note, with deep respect for the Jewish tradition, that this interpretation does not diminish the Seder's meaning within Judaism. The Passover belongs to the Jewish people. Catholics believe that Christ revealed the Passover's fullest meaning, not that it was defective or incomplete. Vatican II's Nostra Aetate affirms that the Church received the revelation of the Old Testament through the people with whom God concluded the ancient covenant. We are grateful, not triumphalist. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at the foot of the cross, watching Jesus drink a cup that has been waiting since he stood up from the table in that upper room. It leaves us at every Mass, participating in the one sacrifice that was begun at a Passover Seder and completed on Calvary. It leaves us with a question you cannot ignore. If the Last Supper was a Passover, and the Passover has a mandatory structure, and Jesus deliberately left it incomplete so that he could complete it on the cross, then the Mass is not a memorial. It is a sacrifice, and you are not a spectator. You are a participant. The next time you are at Mass and you see the priest lift the chalice, remember what you learned today. Read Luke chapter 22, verses 17 through 20. Pray with the Hallel Psalms 113 through 118 and receive the Eucharist, knowing that you are drinking from the cup that Jesus refused to drink until he had given everything for you. If this helped you, share it with a friend, subscribe, and check out our web app for daily Catholic resources and soul search. The Passover had 4 cups. Jesus saved the last one for the cross because his love for you was the only way to finish the meal.